Isolde Bennett walked down the aisle prepared for a funeral rather than a wedding. Her mind filled with reports of a groom who was 90 years old, with skin rotting off his bones and lungs that wheezed blood. Dressed in white, but feeling resigned to widowhood, she looked at the man in the wheelchair, a heap of blankets and bandages reeking of sickness. She took his trembling hand, accepting her fate. But the moment the priest asked for his vows, the trembling stopped, the coughing ceased. When he stood up, tall, broad-shouldered, and terrifyingly strong, Isolde realized the true horror wasn't that she was marrying a dying man. It was that she had just married a dangerous stranger who had fooled the entire world, and now she was trapped. The rain in London didn't wash things clean. It only made the soot stick harder to the cobblestones. Inside the drawing room of the Bennett estate, the air was thick with the smell of stale pipe tobacco and impending ruin. Isolde Bennett stood by the frosted window, watching the gray downpour. She was 22, with hair the color of burnt autumn leaves and eyes that had seen too much worry for her age. Behind her, the scratching of a quill against parchment sounded like rats gnawing in the walls. "It is a generous offer, Isolde," her uncle, Silas Bennett, said. His voice was oily, lacking any real warmth. "More generous than a girl in your financial position deserves." Isolde turned. Silas was sitting at her late father's mahogany desk, a desk he had usurped only a week after the funeral. Opposite him sat a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, Mr. Thaddeus Grinn, the solicitor for the Duchy of Blackwood. "Generous?" Isolde's voice trembled slightly, though she locked her knees to keep her posture rigid. "You are asking me to marry the Duke of Blackwood, a man the papers call the corpse of Devonshire. Rumors say he is 90 years old, Uncle. They say he has leprosy. They say he is mad." Mr. Grinn cleared his throat. He didn't look up from his briefcase. "His Grace, the Duke, is indeed indiscriminately prolonged in years. His health is failing rapidly. He requires a companion for his final days, someone to manage the household affairs and ensure his comfort until the inevitable." "And for this service," Silas interjected, a greedy glint in his eyes, "the duchy will settle your father's gambling debts in full. The estate will be saved. Your younger sister, Clara, will have her dowry secured. You will be a very wealthy, very young widow before the year is out." Isolde felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't a marriage proposal. It was a transaction, a sale. "Why me?" Isolde asked, looking directly at the solicitor. "Surely there are desperate women in Devonshire. Why come all the way to London for a bankrupt baronet's daughter?" Mr. Grinn finally looked up. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "His Grace is particular. He requires a woman of specific breeding, but one with no powerful political connections. Someone who will be discreet. Your family's isolation suits his needs." "And if I refuse?" Silas slammed his hand on the desk, making Isolde jump. "Then we are on the street by Tuesday, girl. Baron Frederick calls in the notes on Monday. Do you want Clara working in a textile mill? Do you want to see your mother begging for scraps?" Baron Frederick. The name made Isolde's skin crawl. The Baron was 50, obese, and had hands that lingered too long. He had offered to clear the debts too, in exchange for Isolde becoming his mistress. The choice was between a lecherous predator who would live for another 20 years, or a dying old man who would leave her alone and likely pass away within weeks. Isolde looked at the portrait of her father hanging above the fireplace. He had been a weak man, a gambler, but he had loved them. He had lost everything, and now it was her turn to pay the tab. Fine.
Isolde whispered, the word feeling like ash in her mouth. "Speak up," Silas snapped. "I said fine," she cried out, tears finally pricking her eyes. "I will marry the Duke, I will be his nurse, his wife, his whatever. Just sign the papers and leave Clara's money alone." Mr. Grine produced a document that looked ancient, the wax seal already prepared. He uncorked a bottle of ink. "The ceremony will be immediate," Grine said, his tone devoid of sympathy. "We leave for Blackwood Manor tonight. His Grace does not have much time." Isolde signed her name. The ink looked distressingly like blood in the dim gaslight. She wasn't just signing away her freedom. She felt she was signing her own death warrant. She was going to a house of sickness to watch a stranger die. She didn't know that death would have been a simpler fate than what awaited her at Blackwood. The journey to Devonshire took 2 days of grueling travel, first by train, then by a carriage that rattled Isolde's bones. As they moved away from the city, the world became wilder. Trees grew twisted and gnarled. The fog rolled in off the moors like a living thing, and the silence of the countryside was oppressive. Blackwood Manor sat on a jagged cliff overlooking a churning gray sea. It was a monstrosity of Gothic architecture, spires that pierced the sky like needles, stone gargoyles eroded by salt and wind, and windows that looked like blackened eyes. "It looks abandoned," Isolde murmured as the carriage clattered over the drawbridge. "Quiet," Mr. Grine snapped. He had been silent for most of the trip, but as they neared the manor, he seemed to grow tense. His hand hovered near his coat pocket, where Isolde suspected he carried a pistol. The great oak doors groaned open. They were greeted not by a warm hearth, but by a lineup of servants who looked more like ghosts than people. The housekeeper, a severe woman named Mrs. Danvers, no relation to the literary figure, though she shared the demeanor, curtsied stiffly. She wore all black, a ring of keys at her hip that jangled like jailer's chimes. Is his Grace awake?" Grin asked. "Barely," Mrs. Danvers replied. Her voice was like dry leaves skittering on stone. "The coughing fits have been bad today. Dr. Eris is with him. Take Miss Bennet to her room to change. The wedding is in 1 hour, in the chapel." Isolde felt panic rising in her throat. 1 hour? Can we not rest? I haven't slept in 2 days. "There is no time," Mrs. Danvers said, gripping Isolde's arm with surprising strength. "Come." Isolde was led up a winding stone staircase. The house was freezing. Drafts whistled through the corridors, extinguishing candles. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors who all seemed to be scowling. But there was something else, a smell. Beneath the scent of old wood and wax, there was the faint, sickly sweet odor of rot, medicine, and decay. Her room was grand but dusty, the velvet curtains moth-eaten. Mrs. Danvers produced a wedding dress. It was not new. It was yellowed with age, the lace brittle. "This belonged to the late Duchess," Mrs. Danvers said. "Put it on." "Who was the late Duchess?" Isolde asked, shivering as she stripped off her traveling clothes. "His mother died in childbirth 70 years ago." Isolde suppressed a shudder. She was marrying a man whose mother died 70 years ago. The math was terrifying. Once dressed, she looked like a specter. The dress hung loosely on her frame. Mrs. Danvers placed a heavy veil over her face, obscuring her vision. "Don't speak unless spoken to," the housekeeper warned. "His Grace hates noise. It hurts his head." They walked down to the private chapel. It was a cold stone cavern, lit only by flickering tallow candles. The smell of incense was overpowering, trying to mask that underlying scent of sickness. At the altar, A priest stood with his back to them, muttering Latin prayers, and there, in the center, was the wheelchair. Isolde's breath hitched. The figure in the chair was slumped over. He was covered in heavy wool blankets, despite the stifling incense. His legs were hidden. His hands, resting on the armrests, were wrapped in bandages, showing only fingertips that looked bruised and purple. His head was bowed, covered by a hood and a porcelain mask, the kind doctors used in the plague times, though without the beak. Just a smooth, white, expressionless face. A wheezing sound rattled from his chest. It sounded like a bag of marbles being shaken in fluid. Isolde stepped forward, her legs feeling like lead. She stopped beside the chair. The smell was intense here. Iodine, laudanum, and old sweat. "Your Grace," the priest said, turning around.
Eyes were wide, fearful. The bride is here. The figure in the chair didn't move. The wheezing just got louder. A gloved hand lifted weakly, signaling them to proceed. Isolde looked at Mr. Grin, who was standing in the shadows, his hand still in his pocket. He nodded sharply. "Do it for Clara," she told herself. "He will be dead soon. Just say the words." "We are gathered here," the priest began, rushing through the liturgy, as if he expected the groom to expire before the Amen. When it came time for the vows, the Duke didn't speak. He simply nodded his masked head. "And do you, Isolde Bennet, take this man?" Isolde looked at the mask. She felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of pity. He was so frail, so alone. "I do," she whispered. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the priest said, closing the Bible with a snap. "You may... well, there is no need to kiss the bride." Suddenly the chapel doors banged open. Wind and rain howled into the room, extinguishing half the candles. A figure stood in the doorway, a tall, menacing silhouette. "Stop this farce," the voice boomed. It was Baron Frederick. He had followed them, and he wasn't alone. He had 2 hired thugs with him, armed with cudgels. Isolde spun around, gasping. "Baron, how did you—" "You think you can cheat me, Silas?" The Baron ignored Isolde, shouting at the empty air, assuming her uncle was there. He stormed down the aisle, water dripping from his heavy coat. "The girl is mine. The debt belongs to me. This marriage is a sham." Mr. Grin stepped forward, drawing a small revolver. "Leave this holy place, Baron. You are trespassing on ducal land." The Baron laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Ducal land? Look at him." He pointed a fat finger at the figure in the wheelchair. "That thing is a carcass. He can't protect her. He can't even wipe his own chin. I'm taking the girl as payment." The thugs moved forward. Grin hesitated. There were 2 of them, big men. "Grab her," the Baron commanded. One of the thugs reached for Isolde. She screamed, backing away, tripping over the heavy train of her dress. She fell backward, landing hard against the wheels of the wheelchair. "Don't touch me!" she screamed. The thug sneered, raising his hand to strike her. "Quiet, bitch." Isolde squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blow. It never came. A sound tore through the chapel. Not a wheeze, not a cough, a low, guttural growl. Snap! Isolde's eyes flew open. The dying hand, the one wrapped in bandages, had shot out with the speed of a cobra. It had gripped the thug's wrist in midair. The bandages tore away, revealing not purple, bruised skin, but a hand that was tanned, scarred, and corded with muscle. The thug's eyes went wide. "What the—" The figure in the wheelchair slowly lifted his head. The porcelain mask tilted. "You are disturbing my wife," a voice said. It wasn't the raspy whisper of a 90-year-old. It was a baritone, rich and cold as the ocean floor. With a sickening crunch, the Duke twisted the thug's wrist. The man screamed and dropped to his knees. The Duke stood up. The blankets fell away like a shed skin. He wasn't frail. He wasn't stooped.
He stood over 6 feet tall, wearing a tailored black suit that strained against broad shoulders and a powerful chest. He reached up and ripped the porcelain mask off his face. Isolde forgot to breathe. He wasn't 90. He wasn't rotting. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26. His face was strikingly handsome, sharp-jawed and intense, though a jagged scar ran from his temple down to his cheekbone, giving him a dangerous edge. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue, burning with a rage that made the Baron's thugs step back in terror. "Alistair," Mr. Grin breathed, lowering his gun. The young Duke cracked his neck, staring down at the Baron. "I have been sitting in that chair for 6 months, waiting for the rats to come out of the woodwork," he said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "And look what dragged itself in." Isolde sat on the floor, staring up at the stranger she had just married. The dying old man was gone. In his place stood a predator, and she was the bait. The chapel was silent, save for the wind howling through the open doors and the whimpering of the thug on the floor. Baron Frederick stood frozen, his face draining of color until it matched the priest's tallow candles. "A ghost," the Baron sputtered, backing away until his heels hit a pew. You're supposed to be a corpse." Alistair Sterling, the Duke of Blackwood, stepped over the moaning thug with casual grace. He moved with the predatory fluidity of a jaguar, silent, heavy, and lethal. He adjusted his cufflinks, his blue eyes locking on to the Baron with terrifying intensity. "Disappointed, Frederick?" Alistair asked softly. "I imagine you had already spent the money you thought you'd squeeze out of my estate once I croaked." The Baron looked at his remaining hired muscle. "Kill him! He's just one man! Kill him!" The second thug, a giant with a scar across his nose, hesitated only a moment before charging. He swung a heavy wooden cudgel aimed directly at Alistair's skull. Isolde screamed, "Look out!" She needn't have bothered. Alistair didn't even flinch. He ducked under the swing with impossible speed, driving his fist into the man's solar plexus. The sound of air leaving the man's lungs was like a bellows collapsing. As the man doubled over, Alistair brought his knee up, connecting with the man's chin. The thug collapsed, unconscious before he hit the stone floor. It had taken less than 3 seconds. Alistair turned his gaze back to the Baron. "Your turn." Baron Frederick shrieked and scrambled backward. Tripping over his own coat, he fell at the feet of Mr. Grin. The solicitor looked down at the fat man, his face impassive, and kicked the Baron's cane out of reach. "Mercy!" the Baron cried, holding his hands up. "I didn't know. Silas Bennett told me you were helpless. He sold the girl to me first." Isolde felt the blood drain from her face. She knew her uncle was cruel, but to sell her twice? To pit 2 monsters against each other with her as the prize? Alistair stopped inches from the Baron. He reached down, gripping the man by his lapels, and hoisted him into the air as if he weighed nothing. "Silas Bennett is a fool, but you broke into my home. You threatened my wife." "I won't tell anyone," the Baron blubbered, tears streaming down his red cheeks. "I swear, I'll leave the country." Alistair's expression didn't change. "You certainly will." He looked at Grin. "Thaddeus, have the carriage brought around. Take the Baron to the docks. Ensure he boards the first ship to the colonies. If he sets foot on English soil again—" Alistair leaned close to the Baron's ear. "I will find you, and I won't be this gentle next time." Grin nodded. "And the thugs?" "Dump them at the county line." As Grin dragged the sobbing Baron away, the chapel fell silent again. The priest had fainted behind the altar. Isolde remained on the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the man towering over her. He was beautiful, yes, devastatingly so, but he was also terrifying. The scar on his cheek twitched as he clenched his jaw. He turned to her. The rage in his eyes faded, replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. He extended a hand. "Get up," he said. It wasn't a request. Isolde stared at the hand. It was the same hand she had thought was crippled just minutes ago. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am your husband," he replied dryly, "and you are sitting on a cold floor. Take my hand, Isolde." "You lied," she said, her voice shaking. She didn't take his hand. She pushed herself up, gathering her tattered dignity along with her heavy skirts. "You fooled everyone. My uncle, the newspapers, me. I did what was necessary to survive, and now, because of that fool Baron, my timeline has been accelerated. We have work to do." "Work?" Isolde let out a hysterical laugh. "I just married a dying nonagenarian who turned out to be a 25-year-old prizefighter. I want an annulment. I want to go home." Alistair took a step closer, crowding her space. The scent of him, rain, sandalwood, and danger, was overwhelming. "You have no home, Isolde. Your uncle has sold it. Your father's debts are paid, yes, but only because I paid them. You belong to the duchy now." "I am not a piece of furniture," snapped, poking him in the chest. He looked down at her finger, amused. "No, furniture is quiet. You, it seems, have a fire in you. Good. You'll need it." He turned and began walking toward the heavy oak doors. "Come, the chapel is freezing, and we need to discuss the terms of your imprisonment." "My what?" "Your marriage," he corrected over his shoulder, though the tone implied there was no difference. "Welcome to Blackwood, Duchess. Try not to get killed." Isolde followed him, not because she wanted to, but because the storm outside was raging and she had nowhere else to go. He led her not to the guest quarters, but to the master wing of the manor. The house was different now that she knew the truth. The silence wasn't one of emptiness, it was one of secrecy. She realized the servants, the few she saw, kept their eyes down not out of sorrow, but out of discipline. They knew. He led her into a massive library. A fire was already roaring in the hearth. He went straight to a crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Brandy," he said, holding one out to her. "Drink. You look like you're going to faint, and I don't catch swooning women." Isolde took the glass and downed it in one burning gulp. She coughed, gasping for air. "Why?" she demanded, slamming the glass down. "Why the wheelchair? Why the mask? Why the rumors of leprosy?" Alistair sat in a leather armchair, stretching his long legs out toward the fire. He looked exhausted now, the adrenaline fading. He rubbed the scar on his temple. "Because," he said quietly, "someone in this family has been trying to murder me since I was 12 years old." Isolde paused. "Murder you?" "My father died of a mysterious stomach ailment when I was 10. My older brother fell off a balcony that had been sawed through when I was 14. I am the last sterling left." He swirled his brandy. 3 years ago, I was poisoned. Arsenic in my wine. It nearly killed me. It left me paralyzed for months and ruined my lungs. That wheezing you heard in the chapel, that was real for a long time, but I recovered, slowly, secretly. "So you pretended to still be dying," Isolde realized. "Exactly. If my enemy thinks I am rotting away, they will wait for nature to take its course. They stop trying to actively kill me. It bought me time to find out who they are." "And have you found them?" "I have suspects," Alistair said darkly, "but no proof, until today." He looked at her. "The Baron wasn't part of the plan, but his arrival forced my hand. Now the world, or at least the people in that chapel, know I am strong. Word will spread. My enemies will strike again, and soon. They will be desperate." Isolde hugged her arms around herself. "And where do I fit in? Why drag me, a bankrupt girl from London, into a firing squad?" Alistair stood up and walked over to her. He towered over her, his presence suffocating, yet strangely magnetic. "Because of the will. The Blackwood Trust is locked until I produce an heir or reach the age of 30. I am 25. If I die before then without a wife, the estate, the money, the land, the power dissolves and goes to the crown. But if I am married, the estate goes to my widow." Isolde felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. "You made me a target." "I made you a player," he corrected. "If they kill me now, they get nothing. You get everything. Therefore, their target shifts. They have to keep me alive to annul the marriage. Or kill me first," she finished, her voice a whisper. "Precisely." Isolde slapped him. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Alistair's head turned to the side. He didn't look angry. He slowly turned back, his tongue pressing against the inside of his cheek. "I deserved that," he admitted. "You are a monster," she hissed. "You used my family's desperation to turn me into a human shield." "I am a man who wants to live," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And I am a man who pays his debts. Your sister Clara is safe. Your mother is housed. You have the finest clothes, the best food, and the protection of the most dangerous man in Devonshire. All you have to do is stay alive and play the part." "What part?" "The devoted wife. To the outside world, I am still the recluse. You will be my voice. You will run the house. You will watch for the knife in the dark." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch a lock of her copper hair. "We are in this together now, Isolde, till death do us part. Let us hope it is not tonight." He turned and walked to the door. "Sleep here. The door locks from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me or Grin. There is a pistol in the nightstand. Learn to use it." With that, he left her alone in the firelight, trapped in a golden cage with a key made of gunpowder. The next morning, Blackwood Manor was a flurry of activity. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stark, pale sunlight that illuminated the dust motes dancing in the grand hallways. Isolde had not slept. She had sat in the armchair, the heavy pistol in her lap, watching the door handle. It hadn't moved. When she emerged, dressed in a high-collared gown of emerald velvet she found in the wardrobe, the house felt different. The servants watched her with new respect and fear. They knew she was the Duchess now. She found Alistair in the dining room. He was eating breakfast, reading a newspaper. He looked infuriatingly fresh, his
Dark hair, damp from a bath, his jaw smooth-shaven. "Sit," he said without looking up. "Eat. You'll need your strength. My aunt is coming." Isolde froze halfway to her chair. "Your aunt?" "Lady Beatrice. She lives in the dower house on the edge of the estate. She has been the matriarch of the family since my parents died. She will want to meet the woman who snagged the dying duke." "Is she the one?" Isolde asked, lowering her voice. "The poisoner?" Alistair finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "Beatrice doted on me as a child. She nursed me when I was sick. It is hard to believe it could be her. But in this house, affection is often just a mask for ambition.
Her son, my cousin Percival, stands to inherit a small fortune if the main line fails. Watch her, watch him." An hour later, a carriage arrived. Lady Beatrice was a small woman, bird-like, with sharp eyes and hands that fluttered constantly. She was accompanied by Percival, a man of perhaps 30, with a soft, doughy face and wet lips that reminded Isolde of the Baron. "Oh, you poor dear thing!" Beatrice cried, sweeping into the drawing room and seizing Isolde's hands. "To be married in such haste, to such a tragical situation. We were devastated we couldn't attend, but Alistair insisted on such privacy." "It was His Grace's wish," Isolde said, keeping her face neutral. She felt the strength of Alistair standing behind her, not too close, maintaining the illusion of his frailty. He was back in the wheelchair, the blanket over his legs, his posture slumped. The mask was gone, but he looked pale, likely thanks to powder. "And how is my nephew?" Beatrice asked, looking at Alistair with what seemed like genuine concern. "Surviving, Aunt," Alistair rasped, his voice weak. Percival smirked, pouring himself a drink without asking. "For now. One wonders what a young, vibrant girl like Isolde, is it, will do with herself in this mausoleum. It must be lonely." Percival's eyes raked over Isolde's body. She felt a wave of revulsion. "I find the solitude peaceful," Isolde said sharply, "and I am quite busy caring for my husband." Of course," Beatrice said, patting Isolde's hand. "But you must be tired. Percival, why don't you show Her Grace the gardens? The winter roses are blooming. Alistair needs his rest." It was a command, not a suggestion. Alistair coughed, waving a hand. "Go," he wheezed. "Fresh air. Good for you." Isolde hesitated, but she caught Alistair's eye. A microscopic nod. "Go. Find out what you can." She walked with Percival into the walled garden. The air was crisp. Dead leaves crunched under their feet. "You know," Percival said, moving too close to her as they walked down a path of yew hedges, "everyone thinks you're a gold digger, waiting for him to die." "People can think what they like," Isolde said, quickening her pace, "but I don't."
"Think that?" Percival smiled, his teeth yellow. "I think you're a victim. Silas Bennet sold you, didn't he? You're trapped here with a corpse." He stopped, blocking her path. "But Alistair won't last the winter. The doctors say his lungs are practically liquid. When he goes, you'll be all alone." "I will be the Duchess," Isolde reminded him. "A duchess needs protection," Percival said, reaching out to stroke her arm. "I could offer that. I could make sure the transition is smooth, if you and I were friends." "I am married, Lord Percival." "To a dead man," he snapped. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. "In fact, I can help him. I have a tonic from a specialist in Paris. It eases the pain, speeds up the inevitable peace." He pressed the vial into Isolde's hand. "Put this in his tea tonight," Percival whispered. "He will fall asleep and simply not wake up. No pain, no more coughing. And you will be a rich widow by morning, and I will be there to comfort you." Isolde looked at the vial. The liquid inside was clear, harmless looking. "You want me to kill him," she stated flatly. "I want you to end his suffering," corrected Percival, "and start your life." Isolde gripped the vial. She felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the proof. I
I need to think, she stammered, playing the part of the frightened girl. Don't think too long, Percival warned, his smile vanishing. Alistair has many enemies. If you aren't the one to help him find peace, someone else will, and that person might not be as fond of you as I am. He bowed mockingly and strode back toward the house. Isolde stood in the garden, the cold glass vial burning her palm. She had the weapon, she had the motive, and for a split second, she thought about it. If Alistair died, she would be free, rich, safe. But she remembered the Baron's thug. She remembered Alistair standing in front of her, shielding her. He was a monster, yes, but he was her monster. She gathered her skirts and ran back to the house. She didn't go to her room. She went straight to the library, bursting through the doors. Alistair was standing by the window, watching Beatrice's carriage leave. He turned as she entered, his eyebrows raised. Well, did Percival try to seduce you? He tried to hire me, Isolde gasped, breathless. She marched up to him and slammed the vial onto the desk. Alistair looked at the vial, then at her. His expression softened just a fraction. He told me to put it in your tea, she said. He said it would bring you peace. Alistair picked up the vial, uncorking it. He sniffed it cautiously. Foxglove. Concentrated digitalis. It causes a heart attack, indistinguishable from natural causes in a man of my condition. He looked at Isolde.
Up at Isolde, a strange intensity in his blue eyes. You could have used it. You could be free of me right now. I am not a murderer, Isolde said, lifting her chin. And unlike your cousin, I don't break my vows, even the ones made at gunpoint. Alistair stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a smirk or a grimace. It was a genuine, dangerously charming smile that transformed his face. Well, wife, he said softly, it seems I chose better than I knew. He pocketed the vial. Percival has just made a fatal mistake. He gave us the weapon. Now, we are going to use it to hunt him down. How? Tonight is the winter solstice ball at the assembly rooms in town, Alistair said. We weren't going to go, but now I think it's time the Duke and Duchess of Blackwood made a public appearance. But you're supposed to be dying. Exactly, Alistair's eyes glittered. And tonight, someone is going to try to finish the job in front of the entire county. And when they do, we will catch them red-handed. The winter solstice ball was the apex of the Devonshire social season. Held in the gilded assembly rooms of the county seat, it was a sea of silk, jewels, and hypocrisy. When the carriage of the Duke of Blackwood pulled up, the street fell silent. The footman, looking nervous, lowered the ramp. Isolde stepped out first. She wore a gown of blood-red silk, a scandalous color for a woman married to a dying man, but Alistair had insisted. Look dangerous, he had told her, like a woman who has already buried 3 husbands. Diamonds, cold and heavy, glimmered at her throat, heirlooms that were worth more than her father's entire estate. Behind her, Mr. Grin pushed the wheelchair. Alistair was back in his disguise, the heavy blankets, the slumped posture, the porcelain mask reflecting the gas lamps like a pale moon. They entered the ballroom. The orchestra stopped playing. 300 heads turned. The silence was absolute, broken only by the squeak of the wheelchair's wheels on the parquet floor. The corpse, Duke, a woman whispered behind her fan, loud enough to be heard. I heard his nose has fallen off. And look at the wife, dressed like a harlot. She's counting the minutes.
Isolde kept her chin high, her hand resting protectively on Alistair's shoulder. She could feel the tension in his muscles beneath the blankets. He was a coiled spring, ready to snap. They made their way to the dais at the head of the room. Lady Beatrice and Percival were already there, holding court. When they saw the Duke, Percival's eyes lit up with a mixture of greed and nervous anticipation. "Alistair," Beatrice cried, her voice shrill. "We didn't think you would make the journey. Is it wise?" "I wanted one last dance," Alistair rasped, the sound echoing unnervingly through the silent hall. Percival stepped forward, bowing low to Isolde, his eyes darting to her gloved hands. He was looking for a sign. "Duchess, you look radiant. And how is his Grace's appetite?" Isolde met Percival's gaze. "He is thirsty, Lord Percival, very thirsty." Percival smirked, mistaking her meaning. He signaled a waiter. "Champagne, the vintage reserve, for the Duke." The waiter brought a tray. Percival took a glass, turned his back to the room for a split second. Isolde saw his hand hover over the rim, and then turned back, offering the glass to Alistair with a flourish. "A toast," Percival announced, his voice booming so the whole room could hear. "To the House of Blackwood, may it endure, whatever tragedies befall it." The crowd murmured. It was a thinly veiled eulogy. Alistair's gloved, bandaged hand reached out, shaking violently. He took the glass. Isolde's heart stopped. She knew the plan, but seeing him hold the poisoned cup made her blood run cold. They had swapped the vials earlier. Alistair had a harmless mixture in his pocket, but Percival had just dosed this glass right in front of them. "Don't drink it," she pleaded silently. Alistair lifted the mask slightly. He didn't drink. He poured the champagne onto the floor. The crowd gasped. "I prefer the wine my wife brought," Alistair wheezed. He reached into his heavy robes and pulled out a silver flask. The flask, the one Isolde had supposedly spiked with the foxglove Percival gave her. Percival's smile widened. He thought he had won. If Alistair drank from his own flask, Isolde would be the one who poisoned him. Percival would be clean. "Of course, cousin," Percival said smoothly. "Drink deep." Alistair unscrewed the cap. He tipped the flask back and swallowed. Isolde gripped the back of the wheelchair. 1, 2, 3. The glass flask hit the floor with a clang. Alistair convulsed. A terrible choking sound ripped from his throat. He thrashed in the chair, his arms flailing, knocking over a candelabra. The blankets tangled around him. "He's dying!" someone screamed. "Help him!" Isolde cried, playing her part, falling to her knees beside the chair. "Alistair!" The Duke gave one final violent shudder, and then slumped forward, his masked face hitting his chest. Stillness. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Women fainted, men shouted for a doctor, but Percival didn't call for a doctor. He jumped onto the dais, his face twisted in a triumph he could no longer hide. "Seize her!" Percival shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Isolde. "Seize the witch!" The crowd froze. "She poisoned him!" Percival bellowed, playing to the gallery. "I saw her. She has been plotting this since she arrived. She wanted the fortune for herself. Murderess!" 2 constables, clearly paid off by Percival beforehand, stepped out from the shadows near the orchestra pit. They moved toward Isolde. "No!" Isolde shouted, standing up. "He gave me the poison. Percival gave it to me." "Lies!" Beatrice shrieked,
stepping up beside her son. "My son is a gentleman.
You are a bankrupt gutter rat who killed my nephew. The constables grabbed Isolde's arms. Take her away, Percival commanded, his eyes gleaming with madness, and remove that corpse. I am the Duke of Blackwood now. Are you? The voice didn't come from the crowd. It came from the wheelchair. The room went deathly silent. The corpse sat up, slowly, deliberately. Alistair reached up and grabbed the porcelain mask. He tore it off and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, the sound like a gunshot. He stood up. The heavy wool blankets fell away, revealing not a skeleton, but a man in a tailored tuxedo, tall, broad, and radiating pure, unadulterated rage. He ripped the bandages off his hands, flexing powerful fingers. "A ghost!" Beatrice whispered, clutching her pearls. "No, Aunt," Alistair roared, his voice filling the cavernous hall without a tremor. "Not a ghost, a reckoning." He looked at the constables holding Isolde. "Take your hands off my wife, or lose them." The constables released her instantly, backing away in terror. Percival stumbled back, his face turning the color of curdled milk. "But the poison! I saw you drink!" "You saw what I wanted you to see," Alistair said, stepping down from the dais. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He stalked toward his cousin. "I have been immune to foxglove for years, Percival. Ever since the first time you tried to dose my wine, I built up a tolerance. I drank your death sentence, and it tasted like water." Alistair stopped inches from Percival. "You wanted the title, you wanted the power, you were willing to frame an innocent woman and kill your own blood to get it?" It was her idea," Percival stammered, pointing at his mother. "Beatrice! She planned it all! The balcony, the arsenic! She wants the money!" Beatrice gasped. "You coward! You traitor!" "Enough!" Alistair shouted. He signaled to Mr. Grin. "Thaddeus, bring in the chief inspector. I believe we have a confession." The doors burst open. The real police, led by Chief Inspector Moore, a real name from the Devonshire constabulary records of the time, adding a layer of grit, marched in. They handcuffed Percival and a weeping Beatrice. As they were dragged away, Percival screaming curses, Alistair turned to the stunned crowd. He looked at the hundreds of gaping faces. "The show is over," he said coldly. "Get out." The carriage ride back to Blackwood Manor was a journey through a vacuum of silence, though it was far from empty. Outside, the Devonshire moors were bathed in the pale, indifferent light of a winter moon, but inside the velvet-lined compartment, the air crackled with the residual electricity of violence and revelation. Isolde sat opposite Alistair. For the first time since she had arrived at the estate, there was no wheelchair between them. There were no heavy woolen blankets, no medicinal stench of camphor and rot. There was only a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and terrifyingly alive. He was wiping the white grease paint from his face with a handkerchief, revealing the tanned, healthy skin beneath. The transformation was still jarring to her senses. She had married a ghost, and now she sat across from a warrior. "You are staring," Alistair said. His voice, no longer a raspy wheeze, was deep and rich, vibrating against the carriage walls. He didn't look up from his task. "I am trying to reconcile the two men I know," Isolde replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "The dying invalid who needed his tea stirred, and the man who just broke a constable's arm in front of half the county." Alistair stopped wiping his face. He looked at her, his icy blue eyes dark with exhaustion and something else, uncertainty. "They are both me, Isolde. The invalid was a necessity. The man you see now, he is the result of survival. I'm not sure which one is worse company." He leaned back, stretching his long legs in the cramped space. "You realize what this means. The game is over. The silence is broken. Tomorrow, the newspapers will run the headline that the Duke of Blackwood has risen from the grave. My enemies are in chains, yes, but my anonymity is gone." "Is that what you fear?" Isolde asked softly. "Being seen?" "I fear what comes next," he admitted, looking out the window at the passing shadows. "I have spent 5 years dying. I planned for my death. I orchestrated my estate for it. I never planned for afterwards." The carriage rattled over the drawbridge of Blackwood Manor. The servants, who had likely heard the news via the telegraph wires or the grapevine of the staff, were waiting. But this time, the atmosphere was different. When the footman opened the door, he didn't rush to unfold the wheelchair ramp. He simply bowed, lower than he had ever had before. Alistair stepped out onto the gravel, his movements fluid and powerful. He turned and offered his hand to Isolde. It wasn't the weak, trembling hand of the wedding ceremony. It was a solid anchor. They walked into the great hall together. The house, usually a tomb of silence, felt as if it were holding its breath. Alistair dismissed the staff with a wave of his hand. "To the library," he murmured. "We need to finish the whiskey." Inside the library, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. Alistair poured 2 glasses of the vintage amber liquid, not the fake tea he had used for months, but the real, burning spirit. He handed one to Isolde and walked to the window, staring out at the crashing sea below the cliffs. "Our contract is void," he said, suddenly, his back to her. Isolde froze, the glass halfway to her lips. "Void?" "The terms were specific," Alistair said, his voice tight. "You were to nurse a dying man until
His passing, at which point you would inherit the estate and be free. But the man didn't die. The fraud is revealed. You are legally entitled to an annulment. I forced you into this under false pretenses. I made you a target. You are free to go, Isolde. I will settle a fortune on you. You can have a life in London, away from this cursed rock and its damaged master." Isolde set her glass down on the heavy oak desk with a deliberate clack. The sound made Alistair kern. She walked across the room, the train of her blood-red gown whispering against the floorboards. She stopped inches from him. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the sheer physical presence of him that she had been denied for so long. "You are an idiot, Alistair Sterling," she said. His eyebrows shot up. "I beg your pardon? You think I stayed because of a contract?" She took a step closer, invading his space. "I stayed when the Baron threatened me. I stayed when Percival offered me an easy way out with a vial of poison. I didn't know you were strong then. I thought you were a dying, broken old man, and I still chose to protect you." Alistair looked down at her, his expression softening, the jagged scar on his cheek catching the firelight. "Why?" he whispered. "Why save a corpse?" "Because I saw the man beneath the bandages," Isolde said, reaching up to touch his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, no longer obscured by a mask. "I saw a man who was fighting to survive. And tonight I saw a man who was willing to destroy his entire carefully constructed world just to keep a constable's hands off me." Alistair closed his eyes and leaned into her touch, letting out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. I couldn't watch them touch you. The moment they laid hands on you, the plan didn't matter. The inheritance didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was burning the world down to get you back. Then do not tell me to leave, Isolde whispered, because I am not going anywhere. Alistair's eyes snapped open, burning with a sudden, intense hunger. He reached out, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. The contact was electric, a shock to the system after weeks of enforced distance. I am not an easy man, Isolde, he warned, his voice low and rough. I have enemies. I am scarred. I have forgotten how to be gentle. I don't want gentle, she replied, threading her fingers through the hair at the nape of his neck. I want the wolf who tore through that ballroom. Alistair groaned, a sound torn from his chest, and crashed his lips onto hers. It wasn't a polite kiss, it was a reclaiming. It was the unleashing of 5 years of
isolation, fear, and desire. He kissed her with a desperate possession, and Isolde met him with equal force. She clung to him, grounding him, proving that he was alive, that he was real, and that he was hers. He lifted her effortlessly, setting her on the edge of the heavy mahogany desk, sweeping the maps and ledgers to the floor. The crash of paper and inkwells was lost in the sound of their breathing. "My wife," he murmured against her throat, the words sounding like a prayer and a vow all at once. "My Duchess, my life. Yours," she promised. Outside, the wind howled around the stone towers of Blackwood Manor, battering the windows with the fury of the Atlantic. But inside, the cold was finally banished. The shadows that had haunted the corners of the room for a decade seemed to retreat, chased away by the firelight and the undeniable warmth of the living. The next morning, the sun rose over a calm, steel-gray sea. The storm had broken. When the staff entered the breakfast room, they found the Duke and Duchess sitting together. Alistair was reading the morning paper, which was already screaming headlines about the miracle at the winter ball, and Isolde was pouring tea. There was no wheelchair. There were no masks. As the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, placed a tray of toast on the table, she noticed something. For the first time in 20 years, the curtains were pulled back, the room was flooded with light, and on the hand of the Duke, resting atop the hand of his wife, the bandages were gone. Alistair looked up, catching Isolde's eye over the rim of his cup. A small, secret smile passed between them, a smile of conspiracy, of victory, and of love found in the darkest of places. The dying Duke was dead. Long live the Duke. And that is how Isolde Bennet went from a sacrificial lamb to the Duchess of one of the most powerful men in England. It wasn't magic that saved Alistair Sterling. It wasn't a doctor's tonic. It was the one thing his enemies never accounted for: trust. They thought they were marrying a helpless girl to a dying corpse. Instead, they united a wolf with a lioness. The Duke of Blackwood may have ripped off his mask in the chapel, but it was Isolde who helped him tear down the walls around his heart. What did you think of the twist? Did you suspect Lady Beatrice, or did you think Percival was acting alone? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of gothic romance, betrayal, and revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.